Welcome back to Deep Dive Stoic. In today's episode, we're diving into 8 habits that can really weaken us. And we're going to look at how this ancient wisdom, this Stoic wisdom, can offer some really practical solutions for us in modern life. And, when we talk about Stoicism, I think a lot of people, it comes to mind that it's a philosophy that's very much about what we can control.
Yeah.
Really focused on our thoughts, our actions, and really about cultivating virtues like courage and wisdom, justice, temperance.
Right.
And just sort of learning how to accept the kind of challenges that life throws our way, with a little bit more grace.
Yeah.
So as we unpack these weakening habits today, just keep in mind that the very first step is self-awareness.
Absolutely.
It's always the first step to any real change. And so our mission today is pretty clear: to really understand these 8 habits that make you weak.
Okay.
And to see how Stoic principles can offer us some pretty solid pathways towards strength and inner peace.
Yeah, I love that. And what really strikes me is just how timeless these struggles are. Obviously, ancient Rome, they had their own set of challenges, but those fundamental tendencies, the ones that kind of lead to weakness, those seem remarkably consistent across millennia.
Yeah, human nature, right?
Yeah.
So really identifying these habits, I think, as you said, is that crucial first step.
Yeah.
It's like a doctor diagnosing an ailment before prescribing, a cure, right?
Exactly.
So let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
To the first one. Procrastination of time. Now, we all know this feeling, right? That urge to put off tasks, delay responsibilities.
All the time.
It's almost a universal human experience, but the source material that we've been looking at really frames this habit as something that's something that actually weakens us.
Yeah.
Not just in terms of wasting time,
right,
but by actually eroding our self-discipline.
Yeah. And, if we think about the core of Stoicism and where they place their emphasis, this habit, procrastination, it really clashes with their focus on the present moment, right? Yeah. We think about carpe diem, and so often that's just, kind of a catchy phrase, but it really is a fundamental principle about the preciousness of time and the fleeting nature of time.
Right.
The Stoics, they understood that the future is never guaranteed. The past is beyond our reach.
Right.
So the only time we truly have to act to live virtuously is now. And procrastination is essentially like squandering that present moment.
It is. And, and as the text reminds us, particularly Epictetus, he's big on, really what we should be focusing on is what's in our control.
Yeah.
And, when we procrastinate, isn't it often because we're either fixated on some future outcome that we can't guarantee, or we're trying to avoid the discomfort of the task itself?
Yeah, that's it.
And neither of those things are fully within our grasp. It's kind of an illusion.
Yeah, it's like this anxiety about the future, the discomfort with the present, and those are often the root causes, right? Like procrastination is just a symptom of those deeper issues. And the Stoics offer this really powerful counter to that. Shift your focus from the outcome to the process.
Oh, interesting.
So instead of being, overwhelmed by this huge task, you break it down into these small, manageable steps.
Okay.
And you focus on what you can do right now.
Okay.
That way you're directing your energy towards something you can actually control, which is just the action that you're taking in this moment.
So it's really about setting those small, achievable goals.
Yeah.
And then consistently working toward them.
Yeah.
That becomes like a real Stoic approach to kind of combating procrastination.
Totally.
And, the material also touches on this idea of embracing discomfort.
Oh, yeah.
Because procrastination is often about taking that easy path, isn't it?
It is. And, in our world today, in modern society, we're constantly bombarded with messages of ease, instant gratification, avoid anything unpleasant.
Right.
But the Stoics, they had this very different perspective. They recognize that that growth and resilience are often forged in those moments of discomfort. So by willingly engaging with those tasks that we, would normally want to put off, we're actually building our capacity to handle challenges.
Building a muscle.
Totally.
And the reality, as you mentioned earlier, is that time is finite.
It is.
Every procrastination, it's a little bit of our irreplaceable time that's slipping away.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the second weakening habit. Negative self-talk.
Ooh, a big one.
Big one, And the sources that we've been looking at really highlight this quote by Marcus Aurelius, and he says, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." And, I think that really underscores the power that our internal dialogue has on our self-esteem and really just our overall confidence.
It's remarkable to me how the Stoics, thousands of years ago, without the benefit of modern psychology, they so clearly understood the power of that inner monologue, that constant, stream of negative self-criticism. It truly chips away at our self-belief.
Yeah.
And the Stoic approach is all about taking a more a deliberate, rational stance towards those thoughts. And it's not about suppressing them. It's about examining them, critically.
So how do we do that?
Yeah.
Because, the advice that we've seen suggests, observe your thoughts without judgment.
Yeah.
That sounds a lot simpler than it actually is.
It does. It does. And it takes conscious effort. But the first step really is just noticing when those negative thoughts arise. Those moments of self-doubt or that harsh criticism. And once you become aware of them, then you can start to, create a little bit of distance and analyze them, right? Ask yourself, is this thought based on facts? What evidence do I actually have to support this negative claim I'm making about myself?
Okay.
And often you'll find that those thoughts, they're actually rooted in fear or past experiences rather than present reality.
And so that act of challenging those thoughts, those self-critical thoughts with evidence, it feels very logical.
Right.
Very stoic.
Very stoic.
And the material also emphasizes, this idea of practicing self-compassion. So it's not just about noticing them. It's about actually treating ourselves with the same kind of understanding and kindness that we would offer a friend.
Exactly.
Right, in a similar situation.
Totally. And I think, we tend to hold ourselves to these incredibly high, often unrealistic standards. But the Stoics encouraged us to apply that same rational perspective that we would use when advising someone else to our own mistakes and our own shortcomings.
Yeah.
If a friend failed at something, you wouldn't relentlessly, berate them.
Right.
You would offer support. You'd help them learn from it.
Yeah.
And we need to extend that same level of understanding and compassion to ourselves.
So really by noticing, challenging, and countering that negative inner voice with reason and self-compassion, we begin to kind of cultivate that inner strength.
Yes.
And resilience that the Stoics really valued.
That's it.
Okay, let's tackle that third habit that weakens us.
Yeah.
Avoiding challenges.
Yeah, this is a particularly important one, I think. And one of the sources we looked at, it had this really thought-provoking idea. And it said, if you want to improve yourself, be willing to let others think you are foolish and ignorant.
Wow.
I thought that was so powerful, and it really gets to the heart of the Stoic perspective on stepping outside of our comfort zones.
Yeah, it really does. And staying within those boundaries, the familiar boundaries, as the material explains, it actually limits our development, right?
Totally.
We don't get to build the patience, the courage, the adaptability, which are essential for really navigating all those difficulties
Right.
that life throws our way. And the Stoics viewed facing discomfort not as something to avoid,
Oh, no.
but as an opportunity for personal growth.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's fascinating to me is how much that contrasts with, a lot of messaging that we see today, which often emphasizes, ease and instant comfort.
Right.
But the Stoics, they saw genuine self-mastery as something that is earned through engaging with challenges, through actively, engaging with
That
those.
voluntarily putting ourselves in those situations.
Yeah, voluntarily putting ourselves in difficult situations. And I think it's important to say, not recklessly, but intentionally. We're not trying to be foolish, but we are willing to embrace that discomfort.
So it's not about seeking out unnecessary hardship, the text clarifies, but about meeting those challenges that life presents, and maybe even those that we choose to take on, but with this calm and rational mindset.
Yeah, totally.
It's a real shift in perspective.
It is.
Seeing discomfort not as a threat, but as potential
Yeah, like a catalyst.
for growth.
Exactly. And by choosing to face those challenges, we're actually developing a stronger sense of personal agency, right? We learn to rely on our own inner resources rather than being dependent on external circumstances to always be, perfectly easy for us.
Right.
Which, again, aligns so well with the Stoic emphasis on taking ownership of our thoughts, our actions, and our reactions to, whatever life throws our way.
And the material points out that avoiding challenges, it can actually lead to a fear of failure,
Yeah.
which can be incredibly limiting.
It can.
Whereas Stoicism in a very helpful way, I think, views failure not as a final judgment, but as a source of learning.
Yes,
right?
That's it.
So every time we shy away from something difficult, we're missing that opportunity to learn and to become more resilient.
Yeah, absolutely. And embracing those challenges, even when we stumble, it fosters a much more adaptable mindset,
Right.
one that's focused on that continuous personal development, rather than, kind of fixated on never making a mistake.
Right.
It's okay to make mistakes. We just learn from them.
That's right. So habit number 4 brings us to the topic of indulging in excessive materialism.
Okay.
Now, as we know, Stoicism places a high value on ethics.
Yeah.
And those internal virtues that we've been talking about, often in contrast to the pursuit of external things, possessions.
Yes. And I think what's important to understand here is that the Stoics weren't advocating for, a life of poverty. It was more about this idea of becoming overly attached to material things, to the point where they overshadow what truly matters. Our character, our relationships, our contribution to society. And I think the sources we've looked at, they highlight that risk of losing sight of those deeper values, and then hindering our ability to find true contentment, lasting contentment, when we become so consumed with acquiring wealth and possessions.
And in our current society, consumer-driven society, I mean, that's a constant pressure, isn't it?
It is this idea that, if we just get more stuff, then we'll somehow be happier.
Right.
And
right.
the Stoics offer this really crucial counter perspective. They remind us that external things, they're inherently temporary.
Right.
They're ultimately beyond our control. They can be lost, they can be stolen, they can just become irrelevant.
Right.
And so to place our hope for happiness on such, unstable ground is really setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Yeah.
And furthermore, when we tie our sense of self-worth to these fleeting possessions, it creates this cycle of endless desire. We always want more. We're never truly satisfied with what we have.
Never enough.
Never enough, exactly.
And the material references Seneca here. And he emphasizes the importance of distinguishing between our genuine needs and our often manufactured desires, which, that feels like a really central Stoic principle.
Absolutely. And excessive materialism, I think, often stems from those unchecked desires. We just keep wanting more and more. And Stoicism encourages us to really examine those longings, right? And to prioritize the ones that align with our core values, the ones that truly contribute to our well-being, rather than just chasing after fleeting pleasures or trying to keep up with, whatever the latest trend is.
Yeah. And so the antidote here, as the material suggests, is really about practicing contentment.
Yes.
With what we already have.
Yes, absolutely.
And then consciously, as the text says, shifting our focus towards cultivating those inner virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, those true and lasting sources of satisfaction.
Absolutely.
Things that are fundamentally within our control.
Yeah, those inner qualities, those are the things that are enduring. They can't be taken away from us. And they provide this much deeper, more sustainable sense of fulfillment than any material, acquisition ever could.
Right. And excessive materialism, it can also breed insecurity and anxiety.
It can.
That constant worry about losing what we have.
Yeah.
Or that relentless comparison with others. Right?
Exactly. Keeping up with the Joneses.
Right. Which leads us, I think, quite naturally to that 5th weakening habit, seeking external validation. And the material that we've been exploring really clearly states that this habit undermines the very core of Stoic philosophy. Which, as we've been discussing, really emphasizes those internal virtues.
Yeah. And what's so striking to me about this particular habit is how pervasive it's become,
Oh, absolutely.
Especially in our digitally connected age.
Yeah.
This constant seeking of likes and shares and positive comments on social media.
Right.
For a sense of self-worth. I mean, that's almost the direct opposite of Stoic self-reliance.
Wow.
It makes our emotional well-being entirely dependent on the opinions of others,
right,
which are often, fleeting and unpredictable and ultimately outside of our control.
And the text, I think, rightly points out that true happiness and contentment must originate from within. They spring from the cultivation of those Stoic virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, self-control.
Yep.
It's when we're constantly seeking approval from others, it's like we're giving away our own power.
We are. It becomes this endless chase, this never-ending quest for external affirmation that ultimately leaves us feeling empty,
right,
and insecure.
And the example in the material where someone seeks validation for a blog post through likes, rather than finding satisfaction in the act of creation itself. I mean,
right, yeah.
It's such a trap that we can fall into so easily.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do we begin to break free from this need for external validation?
I think self-awareness is absolutely key here. You know, we need to become more attuned to those moments when we're seeking external praise, and really ask ourselves why, right? Like, is this validation truly necessary? Does it actually align with my core values?
Right.
And cultivating a sense of self-acceptance, one that's rooted in our own internal standards, is so crucial.
And seeking feedback from trusted mentors or friends.
Yeah. I mean, feedback can be valuable, but ultimately our sense of worth has to be anchored within ourselves.
Yeah, and building a supportive community, one that values personal growth and genuine connection rather than just kind of dispensing superficial praise.
I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
That feels important as well. People who will offer honest feedback but won't tie our inherent worth to some kind of external metric.
Exactly. Surrounding ourselves with individuals who encourage our development and hold us accountable to our own values, rather than just offering that constant uncritical approval.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to the sixth weakening habit. The inability to cope effectively with negative emotions. And as we know, Stoicism places a very strong emphasis on the power of reason.
Yes.
When it comes to navigating our emotional landscape.
And I think what's really important to understand about the Stoic approach to emotions is that it's not about suppressing or denying our feelings.
Right.
That's actually a common misunderstanding. It's really more about preventing those negative emotions from controlling us. Like anger or envy or fear. When we allow those to kind of dictate our actions, they can cloud our judgment.
Right.
They can lead to behaviors that are not really in alignment with our values or our long-term well-being.
And the material explains this Stoic view that emotions are often the result of our judgments or interpretations of events, which I think is kind of a very empowering idea, because it suggests that we actually have more control over our emotional responses than we might think.
Precisely. And this is where that Stoic concept of apatheia comes in, which doesn't mean a lack of feeling, right? It's more about this state of emotional resilience, this inner tranquility, and so it's about cultivating that capacity to respond to negative emotions with reason and with wisdom and with self-control, rather than being swept away by them.
So the material lays out some pretty practical strategies for overcoming this habit, and the first one is about cultivating mindfulness. So becoming more aware of our emotions as they arise.
So mindfulness provides that crucial pause between the feeling and our reaction. It gives us the space to observe that emotion without immediately identifying with it,
Right.
and allows us to choose a more thoughtful response.
Okay, the second strategy is to really question our evaluations, to really examine those underlying beliefs and assumptions that are triggering those negative emotions.
So this is about actively challenging those automatic thoughts, right? And those interpretations that fuel our negative emotional states.
Yeah.
By scrutinizing them, we can often, weaken their hold on us.
And then the third strategy is the practice of self-reflection.
Yeah.
So taking the time to really understand our recurring emotional patterns and explore alternative ways of reacting to similar situations in the future.
So it's about learning from our past experiences and consciously choosing more virtuous and effective responses moving forward.
Yeah. The fourth strategy is to really make a conscious choice to seek virtue rather than revenge or lashing out, even when we feel wronged.
Even when we feel wronged, yeah.
It's about really prioritizing those core Stoic principles.
Yes, it's about aligning our actions with our values, even when our emotions are pulling us in a different direction.
Yeah.
It's choosing that path of virtue, even when it feels really difficult.
Even when it feels difficult. And finally, the fifth strategy here is to really embrace serenity, to accept those things that are outside of our control, and to focus our energy on really cultivating that inner control, and thereby lessening the impact of negative external events on how we feel.
This is really a foundational Stoic principle. Recognizing the limits of our influence,
Right.
and concentrating our efforts on what we can affect,
Right.
our thoughts and our actions,
Yeah.
is absolutely key to achieving greater inner peace. And developing this capacity, it takes consistent effort, takes
Yeah.
practice, but every time we stumble, it's just an opportunity to learn and to grow stronger.
Okay, habit number 7 is one that I think a lot of people can relate to. Dwelling on past mistakes.
Ooh, yeah.
It's so easy to get caught in those cycles of regret, of guilt, of self-blame.
It is. And from a Stoic perspective, the key understanding is that the past is immutable. We cannot go back and change what has already happened. And as the material explains, dwelling on those past mistakes, it pulls us away from the present moment. It prevents us from moving forward constructively. It keeps those negative emotions alive and just creates a sense of stagnation.
And the material actually quotes Epictetus here again, reminding us that it's not the external events themselves that cause us distress. It's our judgments about them.
It's our judgments about them.
Yeah.
And, constantly replaying those past mistakes, that definitely leads to some negative judgments.
It does. And so the Stoic approach encourages us to acknowledge our past actions, to take responsibility for them, but then to really intentionally shift our focus towards present improvement.
Right.
It's about extracting those lessons from those experiences and applying them as we move forward, rather than getting bogged down in unproductive guilt or regret.
And the practice of self-compassion, I think, is essential here.
Yeah.
Recognizing that making mistakes is an inherent part of the human experience.
It is.
It's a necessary part of growth. Absolutely. We need to extend that same understanding and that same leniency towards ourselves that we would typically offer to someone else, in a similar situation.
Right. And reframing our perspective on mistakes.
Yeah.
As the material suggests. Seeing them as valuable learning opportunities.
Yeah.
Rather than definitive failures. That can be incredibly powerful.
It can. And that concept of mindfulness comes up again here, right?
Right.
As a valuable tool to help us stay anchored in the present moment and break free from those mental loops of replaying, past errors.
Yeah. Mindfulness is so helpful for really avoiding getting swept away by, thoughts about the past or anxieties about the future.
Yeah.
And really allowing us to be present.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as the material mentions, cultivating gratitude.
Oh, yeah.
For the good things in our lives can also help to redirect our attention away from those perceived failures and towards the positive aspects of our current reality.
Yeah. Focusing on what we have to be grateful for rather than what we, might regret.
Right. And overcoming this habit, as the text emphasizes, it requires a real commitment to these Stoic principles.
It does.
It's really about recognizing that we always have a choice in how we relate to the past.
Yeah.
We can either allow it to kind of weigh us down and define us, or we can use it as a stepping stone.
Yeah, exactly. Dwelling on the past doesn't really serve any constructive purpose.
Right.
The Stoics urged us to focus our energy on living virtuously in the present moment.
Right.
Learning from the past, but not being dictated by it.
Yeah, beautifully said. Okay, finally, we arrive at that 8th weakening habit, ignoring the well-being of others.
Okay.
And this brings us to that Stoic concept of cosmopolitanism. This idea that we're all part of, this larger interconnected human community.
Yeah, and what's so important here is the Stoic emphasis on benevolence, on cultivating goodwill towards all people and ignoring the needs and the suffering of those around us. It not only harms them, it also weakens our own capacity for empathy and diminishes our moral character. It leads to a sense of isolation and disconnection, which is, the opposite of the Stoic understanding of our interconnectedness.
And the material highlights that neglecting the welfare of others, it really prevents us from actively practicing empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
Which Stoicism views as fundamental aspects of good moral character.
Absolutely. They believe that all individuals, just by virtue of being human, deserve our respect and our empathy.
And disregarding the well-being of others, it not only has negative consequences for them,
Right.
but it also deprives us of the opportunity to cultivate those essential virtues.
Yeah. Acts of kindness and compassion, they benefit both the recipient and the giver.
Right.
They strengthen our sense of connection, our sense of purpose.
Yeah, and ultimately the material concludes that ignoring the well-being of others reinforces that kind of self-centered mindset, which actually hinders our own development
It does.
and our alignment with reason and ethics.
It's a failure to recognize our place within that larger human community.
Yeah, and the remedy here, as the text outlines, is to really actively nurture empathy and goodwill by consciously seeking to understand others' perspectives, and by engaging in acts of kindness and service.
I love that.
And so, overcoming this habit, it strengthens not only our own practice of Stoic philosophy, but also contributes to a more compassionate and just world.
Absolutely.
Well, we've reached the end of today's episode, where we unpacked 8 habits that quietly weaken us through the lens of Stoicism. Hopefully, this gave you a moment to pause, reflect, and recognize where small changes can lead to real strength. If something in this episode helped you slow down or see your day a little differently, supporting Deep Dive Stoic goes a long way. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it too. Thanks for being here, and until next time, stay steady.